Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're concluding our Zhuge Regency Let's Talk Lore series with episode 5 titled A Fall from Grace. Before we get started, here's the answer to our trivia question from the end of our last episode. Now last time we ended as Zhuge suffered an embarrassing and costly defeat at the 6th siege of Hefei, and with a massive Wei counterattack led by Sima Fu, Guan Qiujian, and Wen Qin. The already fatigued, battered, sickly, and demoralized Wu army simply did not stand a chance, as while the exact casualty figures were never recorded down in history, it must have been in the tens of thousands, as Wen Qing himself reported that his unit alone killed over 10,000 Wu troops. Even though this record is dubious, because Wen Qing has an interesting and long history of over-reporting his own achievement, which is another topic that we'll get into in the future when we cover the 3 rebellions of Huainan in separate lore series. For now, we're going to keep our focus on Zhuge, who simply did not want to go back to the Wu capital city of Jianye right away to face his reckoning after dealing with such a loss, as instead, he would march his army back towards the Yangtze River and encamp there for more than a month to allow the army to rest and recover, and also allow some of the units that had been scattered and routed to different directions to find their way back before deciding to head towards Xunyang to set up a Tuntian farm with his army, as Zhuge just wanted to avoid going back to Jianye for as long as he can. But before his army would set march for Xunyang, the Wu court, under the guidance of the chief imperial secretary at the time in Sun Mo, started to send one imperial edict after another, summoning Zhuge back to Jianye. And finally, under the mounting pressure from the imperial court, by August of 253, more than 2 months after defeat at Hefei, Zhuge finally returned back to Jianye. Now, once he was back, Zhuge was still the prime minister, grand general, grand tutor, and the regent for the kingdom of Wu. So there was really no one that could officially punish him. But the once popular and beloved regent was no more, as when the true loss of the Battle of Hefei was felt by every Wu citizen who lost a loved one at the battle, Zhuge's reputation would sink into the abyss. And in a direct response to this change in popular opinion, and in an effort of self-preservation, Zhuge ended up taking a hardline approach to his regency, as he would first summon the chief imperial secretariat Sun Mo to reprimand him for spamming imperial summons and interfering with military affairs. Fearful of becoming a scapegoat for Zhuge's defeat, Sun Mo immediately resigned from his post, citing illness, as he would end up retiring from Wu politics for good. Next, Zhuge, in an attempt to solidify his control of the court, went back and looked at all the government appointments that happened after his campaign started in March, as he would renege all court assignments to reassign only people he trusted into these quote-unquote new openings. And it goes without saying that undoing 5 months of court assignments only served to create more chaos and resentment towards Zhuge's regency. But by this point, Zhuge was already a changed man, as his insecurities only made him more irritable and paranoid, as he would constantly scold at officials and frequently change out his personal guards out of fear that he would get assassinated. Back on the military front, eager to restore his reputation and recapture some lost glory, by October of 253, without any time to give the kingdom any rest, Zhuge was ready forming new plans for a simultaneous land and naval attack on both the Xu and Qing province on the Wei east coast. And it was also at this time that Sun Jun, the previous imperial attendant of Sun Quan, and the person who had actually helped inform Zhuge of the previous chief imperial secretariat Sun Hong's plot of removing Zhuge from the co-regency structure upon Sun Quan's death, started his plot to assassinate Zhuge. As we just stated, without Sun Jun, Zhuge would never have become regent, much less a solo regent, as Sun Hong's death paved the path for Zhuge to become this de facto ruler for the entire kingdom. So naturally, Sun Jun was someone Zhuge trusted, and after Sun Quan's passing, Zhuge promoted Sun Jun to become the general of the martial guards, or Wu Wei Jiangjun, which gave him command of the Imperial Palace Guards and thus military control over the Imperial Palace and the young Emperor Sun Liang. Now, with Zhuge Ke's fall from grace, Sun Jun also started to question his own future as an associate to Zhuge Ke, for he also harbored personal ambitions for himself, given that he was an imperial relative and technically a nephew to Emperor Sun Liang, despite being much older in age. So in October of 253, using his position as the commander of the Imperial Palace Guards, Sun Jun would reach out to the child Emperor Sun Liang and ask for his blessing for Zhuge Ke's assassination, as according to Sun Jun's plans, Emperor Sun Liang would have to summon Zhuge Ke for a private imperial feast where Sun Jun and the Imperial Guards would kill Zhuge Ke. Now, Sun Liang had just turned 12 by this time, but he was already old enough to understand the scale of Zhuge Ke's blunder at Hefei and the degree of unchecked political control that Zhuge Ke now wielded. So Sun Liang gave Sun Jun his blessings and planned for the imperial feast where the assassination would take place. Now, when the invitation for this imperial feast finally reached Zhuge Ke's hands, Zhuge Ke's initial reaction was to not attend, as in his state of paranoia, something about this feast just felt off. But as it was imperial summon, Zhuge Ke still rode his carriage to the imperial palace, but at the last moment, Zhuge Ke hesitated, as he would end up remaining in his carriage, debating if he should somehow excuse himself from the entire matter. Waiting for Zhuge Ke at the imperial palace gates would be Sun Jun, who rushed out to usher Zhuge Ke in, as Sun Jun, who Zhuge Ke trusted to some degree, reassured Zhuge Ke's concerns when Sun Jun told Zhuge Ke that if he felt unwell, then perhaps he should just go home for the day. This rather insincere statement made Zhuge Ke believe that perhaps there is no plot against him after all, or else why would they allow him to not attend? So Zhuge Ke relented and got off his carriage and walked into the imperial palace. Now, Zhuge Ke didn't get very far into the palace when his two loyal officers in Zhang Yue and Zhu En, who Zhuge Ke had promoted as imperial palace guard lieutenants to help keep an eye on the young emperor, walked by, as they would secretly pass a slip of paper into Zhuge Ke's hands. On this paper, they wrote, "Something is odd with the feast arrangement today." Seeing this, Zhuge Ke immediately halted his steps as he told Sun Jun that his stomach suddenly felt terrible and that he would unfortunately be unable to attend the feast today, as Zhuge Ke immediately turned around and started rushing out of the palace. But fate would have it, as Zhuge Ke reached the imperial palace gates, official Teng Yin walked in on his way to the feast. Now, Teng Yin had no idea about the assassination plot, so he naturally stopped Zhuge Ke, asking him what was wrong, as Teng Yin and Zhuge Ke were in-laws, with Zhuge Ke's second son, Zhuge Song, married to Teng Yin's daughter. And aside from being in-laws, Teng Yin was a political ally to Zhuge Ke and someone Zhuge Ke trusted immensely, as Teng Yin was the one Zhuge Ke left in charge of the Wu courts when he had gone out on campaign at Hefei. So when Teng Yin told Zhuge Ke to not worry about it, as Teng Yin believed this feast would be good for him, as Zhuge Ke had not seen the emperor in person since he came back from Hefei. Now, with assurances from Teng Yin, Zhuge Ke felt a little better, but out of paranoia, he still went back to his carriage, grabbed his sword, before walking back to attend the feast with Teng Yin. Now, as the feast begun, Zhuge Ke remained tense as he refused to drink the liquor provided by the court, fearing that it would be poisoned. Seeing Zhuge Ke's alertness, Sun Jun told Zhuge Ke to feel free to drink his own liquor instead, which finally put Zhuge Ke at ease as the feast proceeded normally. After a few rounds of drinks, the young Emperor Sun Liang excused himself from the feast on the grounds that he had already drunk too much and was feeling unwell. Then not long after, Sun Jun also excused himself to use the bathroom, but instead of using the bathroom, Sun Jun merely changed out of his robes into military uniform, as he would summon his guards and return with the swords drawn. Sensing danger, Zhuge Ke tried to draw his swords to defend himself, but before he had the chance, Sun Jun's blade had already struck him. Zhang Yue, the Imperial Guard lieutenant that had tried to warn Zhuge Ke previously, immediately drew his blade in an attempt to strike down Sun Jun, but Sun Jun dodged most of the attack as it merely left a cut on his left hand, while he quickly responded with a strike of his own that ended up cleaving off Zhang Yue's entire right arm. Then, before anyone else had a chance to respond, the Imperial Guards loyal to Sun Jun swarmed Zhang Yue and chopped him into pieces as after Zhang Yue and Zhuge Ke was killed, Sun Jun calmly announced the imperial edict from the emperor, decreeing Zhuge Ke as a traitor to the state who was plotting to usurp the crown. And Sun Jun had been ordered to eliminate this traitor along with his entire clan to the third degree. Now, clan extermination to the third degree means the extermination of your own clan, which includes your parents, siblings, wife, and kid, and by extension, 3 additional categories of clans by association in your parents' clan, in your siblings' clans, and in your wife's clan. Now, the statement about Zhuge Ke's intent to usurp here was most likely fabricated to give a proper reason for this assassination, but in an effort to make it legitimate, Sun Jun ended up accusing Zhuge Ke of supporting Prince Sun He to become emperor, as this was a popular rumor due to Zhuge Ke's relationship with Sun He's wife, Lady Zhang, who was Zhuge Ke's niece, as Lady Zhang's father, Zhang Cheng, had married Zhuge Ke's sister, and Zhang Cheng here is the son of Zhang Zhao. And add on the fact that Sun He was the third and eldest surviving son of Sun Quan, and the previous crown prince before being abolished by his father, this rumor didn't seem that far-fetched. But because of this, after Zhuge Ke's assassination, Sun Jun, in an effort to cement Zhuge Ke's crimes, would push Emperor Sun Liang to strip his older brother Prince Sun He of his titles and exile him to Xingdu, where Sun Jun sent officials that would force Sun He into committing suicide. His wife, Lady Zhang, in a loving farewell, told her husband that she would never leave his side, as she too would commit suicide alongside Prince Sun He. Aside from their death, Zhuge Ke's younger brother, Zhuge Rong, who was the commander of the garrison at Gong'an in the Jin province, was also sentenced to death as part of the third degree clan extermination, as Sun Jun would send Shi Quan, the commander of the Wunan unit, or the emperor's own elite troops, along with the local officer in Zhuge, who had a previous grudge against Zhuge Rong, to surround and attack Gong'an. Now, given that Zhuge Rong was more known for his personal vanity, as he insisted on wearing only silk even whilst living in the army camp, and for hosting great parties with his troops rather than having any decisive military talent, as he only held on to his garrison commander post because his relationship to his father Zhuge Jin and his brother Zhuge Ke. So when the Wu forces approached Gong'an, Zhuge Rong didn't even have the decisiveness to attempt to flee and defect to a neighboring kingdom, as he sat on his hands until the encirclement was complete. In the end, he would commit suicide by drinking poison, leaving his 3 sons behind to be captured and then executed as part of this clan extermination. Now, unlike their useless uncle, Zhuge Ke's 2 surviving sons in Zhuge Song and Zhuge Jian, who were both serving as colonels in the capital city of Jianye, reacted much faster and decisively when they heard about their father's assassination, as they immediately grabbed their mother and a few loyal troops in an effort to flee north, hoping to defect to Wei for a chance to save their own lives. Unfortunately, Sun Jun sent one of his officers in Liu Cheng to pursue Zhuge Ke's 2 sons, who would both ultimately be killed in a battle at a place called Baidu when Liu Cheng's forces caught up to them. Now, Zhuge Ke did have a 3rd son, but his eldest son, Zhuge Zhuo, had already died by this period when he was forced to commit suicide by his own father, Zhuge Ke, after getting himself involved in Prince Sun Ba's partisan incident, and thus the entire Zhuge clan of the Kingdom of Wu would perish here, along with Zhuge Ke's ambitions, much like how Zhuge Ke's father, Zhuge Jin, had once foretold when he opposed Zhuge Ke's daring plans in regards to the Shan Yue pacification. Now, the only silver lining here is that Zhuge Ke did have a younger brother in Zhuge Qiao, who was sent to Shuhan to be Zhuge Liang's son at the time when Zhuge Liang did not have a son of his own. Zhuge Qiao unfortunately ended up dying young of illness during a northern expedition, but he did leave behind a son named Zhuge Pan, who ended up returning to being counted as Zhuge Jin's line after the birth of Zhuge Liang's own biological son, Zhuge Zhan. And thus, even with the full clan extermination in Wu following Zhuge Ke's assassination, Zhuge Jin's line technically did carry on, as Zhuge Pan's son, Zhuge Xian, would end up being recorded historically to have relocated to Hedong in the year 264 following the downfall of Shuhan, where most of the gentry clan were forced to migrate to live inside Wei territory. Also worth noting here at the end of this series is that Sun Jun was excessively cruel with the eradication of Zhuge Ke's relative, as even his distant relatives such as Zhang Zhen, who was Zhuge Ke's nephew but also the son of Zhang Cheng and the grandson of Zhang Zhao, would also be killed in the aftermath of Zhuge Ke's assassination. Zhu En, the other Imperial Guard lieutenant and another distant relative of Zhuge Ke, would also be killed, as Sun Jun will now take over in Zhuge Ke's place as the new regent, prime minister, and grand general of Wu. And if you thought Zhuge Ke let all this power go over his head and brought ruins to himself and the kingdom of Wu, just wait until you hear about Sun Jun and his regency, which will be a topic of a future Let's Talk Lore series. And with that, our episode here and series on Zhuge Ke's regency comes to an end. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode and series enough to consider subscribing to the channel for more content on Three Kingdoms history, or simply support the channel by leaving a comment below, or just by hitting the like button. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye!